Chapter 19, Counting Problems. So obviously here we're just going to go over a couple of common challenges you might experience where you're counting. The idea here is to, if you know about these problems, obviously you're less likely to make them and to try and speed up the learning curve. So first of all is you have an unresponsive program. I think most commonly this happens with our voice command with DragonSpeak. Then you can use the task manager to force close the program, and that good old process of turn it off, turn it on again works pretty well. So in my case, you can see that I've pinned the task manager down the bottom here. So when you've got a task manager active, you can right click and select pinned taskbar. The benefit is I can launch the taskbar like this, and then if I wanted to close down say Adobe Reader, I could just select the program and select end task. If you don't have that shortcut installed, then the way to force close down any program that's not working correctly is press Control Alt Delete at the same time, select Task Manager, we get back to the same point, and then you can go ahead and select the program. So knowing how to do that and when you're getting problems is important. So remember to save, pretty straightforward. The benefit, of course, because your C tool was loaded into the newly loaded tools folder within Dropbox, every time you save it, it actually saves that history. So if you save the counting tool 20 times throughout the course of the count, you can log into the Dropbox site and actually have every single one of those versions of those 20 saves will be saved for 30 days. And so if you make a problem, corrupt something, completely mess up, you'll be able to go back and restore the one from a couple of minutes ago, hopefully when you last saved, when you've completed the last zone or zone count. But if you're in the habit of completing the entire count without saving and you get into a problem, you're going to have to go and do all that work again. So really important. I always suggest that you count a specific zone. You can actually use voice command to say save it, and whilst it saves the worksheet and then calculates the zone count column, you can be doing your double checks and counts. Another obvious one is zone counts. You will no doubt learn this from experience, and we'll tell you about it here, but there's nothing like experience to teach you. But I can't explain enough how taking the time to do things correctly the first time with regards to counting is critically important. You'll see in the first weeks of your training that you will make mistakes, as we all did and continue to do. But if you don't get in the habit of making these double checks that are built into the system, for instance doing our zone count, you're probably going to double or triple the number of errors you have, and either you're not going to catch them, send bad reports to clients and lose clients that way, or you are going to catch them, but I promise you, you can probably spend 3 times as much time resolving errors after you've counted them than if you resolved them there and then at the time. So it is critically important every time you finish a count of every single zone, do your zone count. And if it's a zone like a mixed bottle of 6-packs where it's not conducive to doing zone counts, then you should do a double check and just scan back through the zone and match it up to what you counted in real life. And those checks are really important. As I mentioned before, zone counts work particularly well in liquor storage areas with liquor bottles and also on kegs, but you really can't emphasize enough how important doing your zone counts is. One question is, obviously with bottles of beer, for instance, the question is, do we enter that if we have a case of beer, is that 1 for a case of beer or is it 24 for the bottles? Well, it was a programming decision, but we have everything we count by bottles. So if you count 5 cases of beer, that's 120, which is 5 times 24. You'll become pretty familiar with the 24 times table. It's for simplicity, because otherwise we would have to identify whether we're counting a case or a bottle, and so a bottle of Bud would, rather than just being bottle of Bud, it would be bottle of Bud or case of Bud, and it's just another layer of complexity we don't need or have chosen not to deal with. What that means is, in the case of a bottled beer like Budweiser, it will actually have 3 unique barcodes. There's one attached to the bottle on the side of the label. There's one typically on the 6-pack, which will actually be a different barcode to on the bottle. And then again, we'll have a case code, which again will be different from the other 2. And so, of course, we could have set up the system so that those 3 different barcodes were attached to a single bottle, a 6-pack, and a case. But how we've made a programming decision is all of those 3 different barcodes are linked to the bottle, and so whatever you do, you're always going to count bottles, not cases. Same goes for wine. Quick note on booby traps. What we mean with this is designs of the system that make it very easy to make errors. I think we've talked before about the different a family of tequila. So for instance, Patron has the Blanco, the Reposado, and the Añejo. Actually, Patron is decent. Their bottles look quite different because the colors green, yellow, and orange. But with other flavors of tequila, often the only thing that's differentiating the different of those three bottles is the word Reposado, Añejo, and Blanco written on the tequilas. And so just be aware that it's easy to confuse different aged tequilas within the same family. Another good example is things like Sky Vodka. Sky Vodka has a lot of different flavors, and some of them, I think pink is a color. I can't remember which flavor it is, but there's multiple flavors that have pinks that are so similar it's very easy to make errors. And so it's important to be aware that it's easy to make errors. A more common example perhaps is the Grey Goose flavors. You'll notice that the Grey Goose bottles all look quite similar if you're just looking at the tops of them. In particular, the La Poivre, the Pear Vodka, and the Citron have just a subtly different color variation in the ring around the top of the bottle. So those are a few common examples, but you should look out for these things where it's easy to make errors. Other examples we mentioned in the past is things like single malt whiskies that might, for instance, have a 12-year version and then a 12-year double oak aged or something. So if you don't take the time to read the whole label and just see the 12-year, it'd be easy for you to think that the oak aged and the 12 years is exactly the same product when in fact it's not. Forgetting batches or infusions. So when we're doing our counts, typically we've got the barcode, the bottle scale plugged into the laptop, and so we're used to weighing all those bottles of open liquor and wine. And then we'll be in a separate mode, we're doing our kegs and have our keg scale out. In many cases, batches or pre-mixed infusions or batches will be sufficiently big containers that you can't use the bottle scale because it will max out the weight that's permitted on the bottle scale. But you're behind the bar in a zone where you're doing everything counting on the bottle scale, and so we try and typically put the batches or infusions in a place into the counting map where it makes sense. Maybe we finished up the bar, and then just before we finish up the bar, we'll go and weigh those infusions with the keg scale. But it's easy to forget batches and infusions because they're not standard. You might have to use a different scale, and so just be aware that you need to put the batches, place them in the map somewhere where it makes sense. Perhaps you're just about to go and do the walk-in cooler after doing the bar. In that case, obviously we'll get the scale out to go and do the walk-in cooler, and so that would be an opportune time to do the batches. But it's very easy to forget to do the batches, so just remember that. Dealing with disorganization. So you'll quickly learn during your training that the difference between counting any area, a bar, a liquor storage area, between counting a really well organized one where things are pretty much in the same order, and then counting a really disorganized one where one product might be kept in multiple different places just for macronization. Often it might take literally 3 or 4 times as much time to count a disorganized room. The danger is that after you've reset up the map, remade up the map, you're kind of fed up, and so you move quickly on to the next point, onto the next part. But if you don't take a second to have a word with the bar, your client, the owner, the manager, whatever, and discuss the disorganization and figure out how we can improve the situation, you can be damn sure you'll have the exact same situation next time. So it's another example of that. Do one thing to speed up the data collection for next week. With disorganization, lack of labeling, it is really important that when you have bad organization, that we try and take some steps. And a final word on that: if it's a brand new client during a trial and we're trying to win their business, I don't think that's the time to talk to them about how their keg room looks like a bomb just went off in it. But once we've got them as a client, that would be a time that we'll start to talk about these things. And remember, these days we typically have tiered pricing, so we'll give them a price, and then it'll be plus $20 until they're getting 10 out of 10 on the GAF efficiency index. So that provides a motivation for them. But don't talk about disorganization, or don't try and fix them before you've got them as a client. But once you've got them as a client, definitely we can try and pragmatically work on this sort of stuff. Silly little rhyme we use: if in doubt, pull it out. What do we mean by that? Well, it means if we see stacked cases of beer, you need to, and the doubt is, well, is that bottom case really a full case, or has it been opened? Particularly during setups, it's really important that you pull apart all the stacks. In fairness, if you've got a stack of 10 cases of Budweiser, you can probably presume that those are Budweiser down to the bottom. If it was a brand new client, I would be in the habit of pulling all those cases and making sure there isn't a half-open case at the bottom. If you were to notice a half-open case, or a case that's had a 6-pack removed halfway through the stack, okay, it would be a pain in the neck to find that. It's going to be a very useful piece of information to communicate to the manager or to the client, and they're going to know that you took the extra effort to pull that apart. But yeah, most commonly this affects partial cases of beer, which are often stacked on top of each other. Sometimes they don't contain the type of beer that they should, as in maybe a couple of six-packs have been thrown in a case with another one. But if you're not sure what's in these cases, you have to pull them out, tear them apart, make sure you open them up, check if the flaps on top have been pulled open. But yeah, remember, if in doubt, pull it out. Obviously, we run a business of doing accurate counts, and so there's no way around it. You've got to pull stuff out if you're not sure what the counts are. Old bottles, bad tear weights. So you can use the example here of Don Julio. So Don Julio, obviously very popular tequila. They used to make it in hand-blown glass bottles. At some point they got to a stage of volume where they simply couldn't, or they didn't want to spend all the money on these fancy bottles, and so they switched up the physical bottles that Don Julio flavors were kept in. And of course, when they changed the bottles, the tear weight changed. So as soon as we see a new type of bottle, we need to go ahead and update the tear weight to the new weight. The problem with that is that normally the barcode is not going to change. So you'll have a barcode that would identify Don Julio Blanco, and it will be the same barcode used with the old bottle as the new bottle. What that means is we can't have two tear weights, one for the old, one for the new, because they're linked up to that unique identifier that's the same. So we're always going to use the newer one. What I would say there is most times the tear weights won't be far off, and so it's not going to be dreadful if you use the old tear weight, the new tear weight with the old bottle. While it might be off by a few ounces, at least it will be consistently off. So it will say you've got 3 ounces more than you have this week and last week, meaning that the amount of tequila we've used will be calculated exactly correctly. But as I said, the policy is that we update to the new tear weight straight away, and then the only challenge you're going to have with the older bottles is those tear weights could be off. If they're miles and miles off, one other option to handle this is to simply tenth that older bottle. So if you've still got the old version of the Don Julio and the tear weight you discover is like 6 or 8 ounces off, so it's like half a bottle, that might be an occasion where it might be worth tenthing that. The other thing to do is try and move those bottles out of storage and have them behind the bar, so perhaps they get used up quickly and we can move on. Mixing up 750s and liters. So the one you understand at this point that the mapping system is designed to increase our speed and accuracy, because we set it up once and then we can run through that same order each time we do inventory. Well, the downside of this is that if you're running through the map and you see Jack Daniels and they've switched out, maybe they didn't have any liter bottles of Jack Daniels when the delivery came in this week, they'll have sent them 750s and it will say Jack Daniels when actually it should say Jack Daniels 750, and it's pretty easy to not notice that. So you need to become skilled at recognizing the difference between a 750 and a liter so that you can notice these rare occasions when they've mixed up the two. And of course, if they have got 750s and liters at the bar, it's going to be quite confusing, which brings us on to our next point. If you're at a bar and you realize, and hopefully it will be a temporary challenge, but if you realize that they've got both 750s and liters, what I recommend doing is when you come to the Jack Daniels liter line and it's really 750s, don't replace the Jack Daniels with the Jack Daniels 750. Insert a new line and scan the barcode so that next door or on top of one another, 2 lines in a row will be, one will be Jack Daniels 750 and one will be Jack Daniels, indicating the liter bottle. Keep both of those lines in there. Every single place in the map you're keeping Jack Daniels, have those 2 different sizes, and that will remind you every time you count Jack Daniels, hey, I need to check, is this 750 or the liter? Keep those 2 lines for each position until they blow through the 750s or the liters, whatever, until they're back to a single size. And once you know they're back to a single size within the store, then you can go back to that 1 line for that product. But as I said, it's a good technique to keep the double line for the 750 Jack Daniels and the liter together as long as they have both sizes, because it means every time you're counting it, it will just remind you. So there's a few counting errors that hopefully will speed you up and save you some time.